Hello and welcome to Middlebury 5-0. I am your host, Officer Chris Mason, and with me in the studio today is the enigmatic Bryan Alexander. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Well, thank you, enigmatic Officer Mason. I hope I'm not an enigma wrapped in a riddle and enclosed in a mystery.
You may be, you may be.
Well, it's your job to make progress on that challenge.
Well, it's a delight having you in the studio. I've been looking forward to this
good to be here.
for a long time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So we're putting on the tape like right away. That
Okay.
beard, magnificent.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want me to put it on the table? I can do that.
There you go.
It's a little above the table, but thank you. It took me 3 days to grow.
3 days, impressive.
Yes, that's a total lie, but yes. Yes. Well, thank
I
you.
feel like it gives a boost to your IQ, I think.
I think it improves everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just improves society as a whole.
Raises the general
Yes,
IQ
the tenor of
of-
things.
yeah.
It does. It does. It makes us all smarter.
Right.
And between the two of us, I think we have about one average head of hair. I mean, I could loan you some, I think, and disqualify you, but, we've about a balance there.
Well, my hair actually used to be at least as long as yours, maybe longer.
Maybe so.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
I had my lustrous locks, but I was compelled to
I understand.
to cut them.
I understand. Well, this is actually shorter.
Mhm.
I used to be longer,
Right.
and then starting around 15 years ago, I began flying a lot more, and this attracted the attention of Homeland Security. So
Okay.
trimming it actually helps a little bit.
Yeah.
I still get some attention though. I used to have a Kindle e-reader with a black cover, and when I would be reading it, people thought I was an Orthodox priest, which was kind of fun.
There you go.
Most recently, I was flying on a plane, got my phone, was downloading a book. It was actually a book on the history of Islam, and I realized if I left it in the plane, someone saw that, looked at me, I'd be in Guantanamo Bay in about 30 seconds. So. But I still get along. I make a lot of friends this way. I meet a lot of people.
Yeah, I used to get routinely searched back in the day, whenever I would fly.
Where?
The facial hair, the long hair.
Yeah,
I
where
think
would you be? Was this in Australia or in the U.S.?
Well, from England,
Mhm.
but all over the place. Flew a few times through the Middle East, Asia.
You didn't make
Down
any
to South
friends in the
America.
Middle East this way. I mean, long hair can often win all kinds of unpleasant friends that way.
I made lots of friends.
So, well, there you go. So it was worth it. It was worth it. See, it improves the community once more.
And I started shaving whenever I was flying, and I haven't gotten such since.
Well,
So
now you can't carry a razor on the plane. It's very different.
yes.
Very different. Very challenging.
So I know you you own a consulting business,
Yes. Yes.
but that's a little vague. What is it that?
Well, so there's that enigma again, right? It's kind of
You're right.
mysterious.
It is mysterious,
What does
yeah.
James Bond work for? Like the Export-Import Organization, right? Something very...
Right.
I once gave a talk to a bunch of people who teach the U.S. Special Forces, and about half of them had very vague titles, like liaison. That's it.
That's right.
Well, what have you been up to? They say, oh, operations. And that's right.
Okay.
So I like the mystery, right? I consult in the future of higher education. So I work with colleges and universities mostly, helping them think about the next 10, 20 years in higher education, how it will change.
Okay.
So, I often give speeches, I consult, I write for them, and I'm just trying to help them think better about the various changes that are happening.
Is that so they can plan for those changes,
Yes.
or implement those changes? Or?
A little of both, but
Right.
planning right now, I mean, that's what I hope. In some cases, they have to implement very fast.
Sure.
This is a strange time period. Education is, in my lifespan, never been under such pressure. It's never faced such opportunities as well, but it's a very scary time in many ways.
So I would imagine that a big part of that is technology.
Yes.
Is there a pedagogical kind of aspect to it as well, or is it about the intersection of those things?
Both
Is
of
it
those
quite-
things
Right.
and many other factors. I mean, so
Sure.
technology has the potential to upend almost every aspect of a college or university life, from finances to the classroom to curriculum to student life to how we reach out to students and communicate with students before or after they come to college. And so that's a big change. Pedagogy itself has begun to change, partly under the impact of technology, but also we've been doing a lot of science where we're actually analyzing how brains learn. And we've been learning a lot of things which fly in the face of traditional pedagogy. So we have the advent of active learning, for example, a lot more game-based and simulation-based learning. And beyond that, we have changes in economics, in the financing of higher education, in demographics. I mean, we live in Vermont, where the population has been graying We've been seeing a smaller and smaller proportion of our population who are kids, and a greater number who are seniors.
Right.
And among other things, this impacts how we do K through 12, but also you think about traditional age undergraduate education. The 18-year-olds that go to campus and stay in a residence hall, that number has been shrinking. So how colleges and universities respond, this is a matter of great urgency. Yeah, there are dozens and dozens of factors pressuring on higher education, politics, popular culture. I mean, it's really an interesting time.
Right, right. So can you give me some examples of how, like concrete stuff, how is technology impacting how we learn?
Well, one way is game-based learning. I mean, you can do games without technology. I mean, chess, Go, right?
Sure.
Role-playing games,
Right.
I could put on your hat and I could pretend to be a police officer, you could pretend to be a suspect. We have a role-playing game, right? But digital technology...
Maybe something else beyond, but...
yeah, well, that'd be a start, right? We have a simulation where I can simulate driving back and forth, but digital games give you a whole bunch of different affordances. One of them is that you can replay, pause, and rewind them. You can have extra lives, and so you can take a situation and go through it several times. But you can also break the walls of the classroom and engage people who aren't in your campus. You can engage people who are anywhere in the world. I was teaching at a small college in Louisiana, and I remember having my students make web pages of their final papers. And they were amazed to actually see a world audience for their writing. So up until that point, the audience, we tell them, think about your audience when you write. That's very, very important. They knew the audience was me, the grader. Maybe their peers, usually they're the grader, which is very realistic. But now they put papers on the web, anybody could read them. It was a little scary and a lot exciting, where they actually felt an impact of someone emailed them and say, I really like what you said about this novel, or what you said about Dickens, or whatever. And that changed them. I mean, they had to rethink what words they use, what language they use, what research they use, and that's very, very exciting. On top of that, though, if you and I were teaching a class on, say, Middlebury and technology or whatever, we can then contribute to anybody else who is curious about this in the world. I mean, if we were teaching a class right now in this room without the television, whoever was in the room, that would be it. But now we have conceivably anybody on earth who could listen. This is a tremendous, tremendous resource. For example, I just started learning Spanish because my children are learning Spanish. I love being able to help them with their learning. I've got Latin and French. I could kind of fudge my way, but it's not really good. And I love languages, and I love a lot of Spanish writers. So, so I started learning Spanish. And if this were 20, 30 years ago, I would probably have, check out a book from the library. We've got some tapes. Maybe, and then try and find a Spanish speaker or Spanish teacher who I could talk to. Instead, on my phone, I have a great program called Duolingo, which helps me learn Spanish vocabulary and grammar. I've got that. Online, there are just dozens and dozens of top-notch academic websites on Spanish language, everything from tutorials to grammar lessons to quizzes and vocabulary. I have all of that available. And then I can share what I'm learning with people and get feedback. I mean, the classroom walls have basically been kicked open, and now technology lets us learn on a global stage. I think we're just beginning to realize what that means. That's a very long answer to your very short, good question.
So that, I mean, what you're describing is a revolution in culture and communication.
Yes.
A massive expansion. That is obviously impacting education and how we learn, but it's impacting just about everything. It's impacting how we communicate, how we share information and connect with each other.
Well, let's say we go to a select board meeting, and we're sitting there, we're listening to somebody, and a select member says something, and it strikes us as odd. We're not sure if it's real or not. 20 years ago, we'd maybe write this down, and that would be it. But now we whip out our phones or our tablets or our laptops, get online, quickly Google that sentence, and say, and then afterwards say, "Excuse me," in question. I don't think that's correct. Or if we have a mayoral or gubernatorial candidate comes by, says, "Well, I've always been against the death penalty." I'm not sure. Actually, no. This one day, 1987, you were for it. That changes the public environment. And that's something that a lot of people in authority aren't always comfortable with. You can do this all the time. We mentioned being in Homeland Security, right at the airport. I can download a game called Jet Set, which is a satirical computer game which makes fun of Homeland Security lines, and play it when I'm in line. Not the most polite thing to do, but then I can take photos of people. I can shoot video of being in line. And for police officers, this is a major issue. Being able to record we're just beginning to realize how the depth and extent of this revolution.
Right. I think it's impacting people's sense of identity as well on a very fundamental level.
How are you
people
seeing
perceive
that?
them. Well, it feels to me, like interacting with people, it feels to me that young people especially, people who use a lot of technology,
Yes.
who are accessing technology routinely on a day-to-day basis, they perceive themselves not as citizens of a nation, but as global citizens.
Yes.
There's an international flavor to how they look at the world.
Are you seeing this in the K through 12 ages?
Yeah. So in
Interesting.
In high school, most particularly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Do you, how does this express itself? That is, do they listen more to, say, world music? Do they identify with a foreign language that's not spoken in the U.S.? Or?
I think what I've noticed, what really strikes me most emphatically is an incredible degree of tolerance.
Well, I have to say, I hope you're right. I mean, I know what you're observing is correct, but I hope that extends around the world. There's a terrific science fiction writer named David Bryan, who in the 90s wrote this fun book called The Transparent Society. So this is in the 90s, and he said, imagine a future where everybody has mobile devices, and they can capture media, photographs, even movies, and they can upload these to the internet. Just imagine, bear with me, let's just try this out.
Yep.
And you could record anybody anytime. And initially he says, this could be a dystopian nightmare, right? No privacy. But then his conclusion is, once this happens, everyone would just chill out. Because anybody could be spotted doing something inappropriate, or maybe even illegal, or embarrassing. Once that happens, everyone is culpable. Everyone can be found out. People would just relax. Now, I used to think this is because he lived in Southern California, and this is a very California attitude.
Right.
And I can think of objections or exceptions to it, but I think overall, I think you and he observe the same kind of phenomenon. I mean, it's a lot easier to fear somebody that you don't know, or you don't meet. You know, demonize somebody who is very alien to you. But if you can Skype with somebody from Bangladesh or from Qatar, I mean, if you can then play, Xbox with somebody who is from Russia, this really changes things.
I think it humanizes people.
I hope it humanizes us in a good way.
Right.
Because we can also hate. We are excellent at hating, but
we do have a gift for that, yeah.
I think so. But to go back, I think this transformation, to the extent that it's happening demographically, that is, you're seeing this more with young people. I think this poses some interesting challenges. We may get a drive to get people to spend more time locally, right? I mean, think about someone who is, say, the only Muslim in town, or someone who is exploring their sexuality in a very concerted area, or someone who's obsessed with My Little Pony and no one else around them is. They can go online and have a wonderful world of support, interest, development, and all of that. Does the local community lose out? I don't think so, but I can see how they might. So I know in journalism there's been a drive to people to be more local, to have more hyper-local journalism. We may see social moves to bring these people back to their nation, back to their state, or in the case of Vermont, to a very small locality, back to Addison County. That's a dynamic which I think we'll see going back and forth. That's just one piece of the technological revolution.
Well, one of the ways I see that impacting people, or I assume, I don't know for sure, but it seems to me that when students, I work a lot with students within the school system, when they're able to reach out and they're able to connect with people who share their interests or their persuasion, orientation, whatever it might be, it seems like they're able to embrace it with greater confidence. So to me, it seems like the opposite is true, that being able to make those connections encourages them to be more engaged and honest and straightforward with their peers about what it is they like and who it is they are.
I've seen some research which says that people who are active online politically often become more active offline. So they're more likely to, sign a petition or talk to a neighbor or, participate in a demonstration or whatever. I think this is terrific. I think I think the overall arc of this is very positive for humanity. The only thing that, there are a lot of ways this can backfire, and one is that people can become very confident about things that are terrible.
Of course.
I mean, for me, you know, and this can be, it depends on what you think is terrible, but it can also be, do you know this term, the filter bubble? Have you heard this term?
I've not heard that term, though.
So if you sign into Google and you search for something, and you do this 20, 100,000 times, Google learns your search predilections. It knows what you're looking for. So if you type in, say, Addison, it's thinking that you're probably searching for Addison County, Vermont, rather than the town of Addison, Illinois, or the great 18th century playwright Addison. Right?
For sure.
And that makes sense. That's very helpful.
Right, I've certainly noticed that using Google, that when I type something in, the suggestions that come up are all related to things I've searched previously.
Which is kind of smart.
It is, yeah, that makes sense. It's
so
helpful.
I search, if we both search for the same thing, you and I are now getting different results.
Yep.
And so if I search for a political term, I may get searches that tend towards my own political orientation. So it's possible that we're filtering each other out into separate bubbles. And this can happen in other ways too. On Twitter, I might decide to only follow people that I like, which kind of makes sense. I mean, I don't want to follow someone who I think will waste my time. All right. But then am I creating a small echo chamber for myself? And we see this with television, which I think is much worse at this. I mean, you know, watch, say, Fox News or MSNBC, and they give you these pipelines into, you know, a clear perspective onto their worlds.
Right.
I think we have to learn, maybe through software, maybe through practice, just to be able to make sure that we don't fall into that trap.
Right. So in getting media that is more and more catered to our individual tastes and interests, it filters out everything at the periphery.
It really does. And we often like that.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to hundreds of people who describe how much they appreciate that. I'll talk to a liberal friend of mine who says, I'm tired of conservatives. I don't want them in my life. And in 1972 or 68, great film critic Pauline Kael said, Richard Nixon won. How could he win an election? I don't know anybody who voted for him. There's this famous thing, like little bubble world, right? And so I think I think to go back to what you were saying earlier, I think we have to learn to ourselves a bit how to get beyond that. So, you know, do you on Twitter, do you deliberately follow a hashtag or a user who has nothing to do with you, or who is just very, very strange? You know, do we do this on Facebook, right? Among our friends, right? Do we do this with an RSS reader or on Pinterest or wherever? I think, ultimately, we'll be better at this. But it's a practice. And I think when it comes to education, this is something that education can really play a role in. Education is supposed to open the minds of students, whatever age they are, you know, 5-year-olds or 65-year-olds. I think educators have a responsibility to help us navigate this new world, this emerging world, this changing world in a more humane and civilized way. And that can mean drawing us into awkward or confrontational or embarrassing situations, which I think of it as, say, living in human society.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of the paradox of education in a way. Is that obviously it is meant to expand your view of things. It's meant to introduce you to new things and ideas and help you to think for yourself and gain the skills to explore it. But so often
but that's often dangerous. You know, someone thinks for themselves and they have a thought that you don't like. I mean, it's much like American foreign policy. We want a country to have democracy, but we don't necessarily want them to vote for that one particular party.
So long as they make the right decision.
Exactly, exactly. And so it's challenging, and things can be scary. You know, I used to teach a class on literature of horror, and I would tell students, this class will probably be scary and disturbing. They didn't always catch on. You know, taught a class in the history of the Vietnam War. I said, this can be really scary stuff. And most of the students, yeah, I understand. And they would be scared, which is appropriate. You know,
I bet that was a terrifying class.
It was. It wasn't as terrifying as the class on film of the Vietnam War. A friend of mine started making that class and gave it up. He said it would have been just too hard for anybody to sit through. But it's history. History is made of stories, and they're not all necessarily happy stories. But once you see them as stories, then history opens up as this extraordinary, extraordinary vista of places to go and to understand.
Right.
And they tell you a lot about now.
Well, I know you have a deep fascination with storytelling.
Yes.
And you kind of touched upon that just now, talking about history in terms of story, which runs contrary to, I think, a lot of people's views on history. They tend to think of history as a very linear progression of facts.
Or as a database, yeah.
Right? And teaching history would be giving people access to those facts and putting them in order and classifying them in certain ways. And
that can kill almost anything, yeah.
Right.
No, the minute you see things in terms of storytelling, it really opens up the world in a lot of ways. You were asking me a question about that, and I just stepped on it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of history in terms of narratives, cast it in a completely different light. I mean, first of all, it humanizes history. It makes it more of a complex, kind of interactive, kind of networked thing, rather than something that is linear. There's cycles and circles to it, and points of contact and intersections. But also, when you talk about it in terms of narratives, it subjectivizes it.
Yes.
So it's you're no longer looking at history from this kind of ethereal, otherworldly position, gazing down as a spectator upon it. You're playing a part in creating it, in retelling it.
Well, one of the great ways of teaching history, to go back to an earlier point, is in terms of games. So a lot of historians find what they call counterfactuals very disturbing. But if you can get students...
A lot of philosophers as well.
True.
Very disturbing.
If you can put students in, well, what's your favorite time in history? What's your favorite period?
The French Revolution.
Absolutely.
Oh, glorious. So
everything goes
much
back to the
irony.
1790s.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Everything goes back to the 1790s. So you get a bunch of students and you put them in the position of the French Assembly in, say, 1793 and give them a vote. They have to decide if they're going to guillotine the king or if they're going to go to war against Europe. And then, we can step back and say, we know what happens. We have plenty of documents to show this. But to put students in that position and say, why would we do this or why wouldn't we do this? What's at stake if we kill our king? What does that say? Then they have to work this through and see what was really at stake. Well, one thing it does is it humanizes and subjectivizes this, because you get the sense of possibility, of perspective, why you might not want to commit regicide, why you might not want to declare war, or why the terror felt like a good idea at the time. You can really step into that, and then history becomes much more alive, and it also brings you to the present, and you can understand choices that people are making now. Should we do single-payer health care in Vermont? Or, how much longer should Bernie Sanders continue his campaign? And I have an answer, until he wins the White House. But the games can open that up. And if we do it digitally, the great thing is then you can rerun these. A couple of friends I know at Dickinson College who teach a game, very, very frustrating, very realistic game on Middle Eastern politics. And it's accurate and frustrating. And so they have the students play. And the game they play from one side, either the head of the Palestinian Authority or the Israeli government. They play this through to the end, then they write about the experience, then they research it more, then they have to play the game from the other side. And then they have to research and then reflect on that afterwards. And I think, what a wonderful way to open things up. Right?
Absolutely.
I think the other thing about stories is that we tend to see characters, and we love to see people. When I ask any crowd, what makes a story a story? Not a good story, but what makes a story? Quickly someone says people. I want a character that I can appreciate or sympathize with. If we go downstairs to the ground floor of the Wellesley Library, if we look at the nonfiction section, you see biographies loom large. And nonfiction, I think that's the second best-selling category of book, after diet books, I'm afraid. But we love being able to see a person, and a person's biography is a story that everyone understands, right? And we can hang on to that. So we have the French Revolution, we think about Marat, we think of Robespierre, we think about Danton. L'audace, l'audace, toujours l'audace, right? And these are fabulous characters, and we can, and then that lets us into what's going on in their minds. Did you ever see the French-Polish film Danton from the 80s?
My very favorite movie.
That's an incredible film. I mean, that's a harsh film too. I mean, when they're having the dinner and Danton's trying to win over Robespierre with an elaborate banquet, it's just going completely the wrong way. But you see those people, and then suddenly the dates all make sense, right? It's kind of like a mystery, like a detective story, right? When you're trying to solve something, you have to get into the head of a perpetrator or a suspect or a witness. That kind of humanizing turns the story and it makes it more accessible. I teach a little class on digital storytelling.
Right.
And what's funny is if I call the class in digital video, I'll look around at people, and you'll see shoulders go up. People are, oh, digital, bad, you know, scary. But if I say, we're doing a class in storytelling, the shoulders go down. Everyone smiles.
Right.
I mean, even the person who calls themselves a Luddite, which they should never do, but if they do, then they relax. You know, because everyone likes a story.
Yeah.
And people can argue about whether it's a good or bad story, but they're arguing because they're engaged. And so I think that's very, very powerful.
One of the things I've also noticed as a police officer within the school system is that there is a tremendous amount of anxiety, a tremendous amount of fear regarding technology, particularly held by teachers and administrators.
Yes.
And in some ways I can understand it, but in some ways it seems very misguided.
Stupid. Yeah, sorry, misguided.
A little more diplomatic.
Well, sometimes it is literally idiotic in the sense that one meaning of idiot is private. Someone who is kind of, you know, someone who's not getting the facts. And this often happens. I mean, you ask people, you know, well, if you hate Facebook, have you logged on to it? Right? Have you used it? I mean, that's a big difference. There's a great science fiction writer, Douglas Adams, who said,
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Guide to the Life. He said that technology means anything invented after you were 30, which I love. I love. You know, because the minute I'll talk to somebody who is an adult, say they're 40 on up, and they'll say, I hate technology. And the first thing I do is I look at them. I look at their body, and I look at things like, are they wearing glasses? Right? And then I imagine, thinking about their body, their medical experience. You know, are they taking some kind of psychopharmaceutical, Xanax, right? Are they on some kind of life-saving drug? Have they had surgeries? And if we're not living in the same town, I wonder how they got there. Do they drive in a car? Do they fly? And if I start asking them about this, they immediately collapse. They have no defense. You know, they can't say, oh, well,
it's the coup de grace.
That's right. Well, there is no defense. I mean, if you want to say I am opposed to technology, if you want to be consistent about it, you have to become a neo-primitive. Right, you have to live off the grid and all this. And if they do, I respect that much more. That's so much more honest. It's a much more difficult path to walk. I had a good friend who we never taught together, but we were on the same campus. I remember him standing next to a brand new car he just bought, saying, Bryan, you're too interested in technology. I looked at the car and said, that's technology, man. That's serious technology. But I think the other reason, there are a lot of reasons to fear technology. One of them is loss of authority. Right. You know, to see a 13-year-old who's better at technology than you are, that can be unsettling. And if you're in a classroom, if you're a principal, or if you're a teacher, you're there for your reputation. You're there because you can teach phys ed, or you can teach French, or whatever. And you feel that eroded slightly. So you have to, I think pedagogically, I think this is a tonic. It forces you to, as a teacher or administrator, it forces you to listen more carefully to the students and to realize that they learn well by taking authority for what they're doing, taking some responsibility and ownership for it. I mean, I love having students peer teach each other. You know, I mentioned learning Spanish. I once accidentally taught Spanish for a day. Didn't speak it. The reason it happened was I was teaching a Gothic literature class, and we had this wonderful, wonderful novella by Fuentes called Aura. Have you read this?
No.
It's fabulous. It starts off as a ghost story, and then it goes completely off the rails. I don't want to spoil it for you. It's wonderful. Okay. So I ordered the cheapest version I could find, good translation, book arrives, and so facing language, you know, Spanish and English. I don't think anything of it. I think there's the English, good, go to class. And the student asks a question, and she says, can I read the Spanish part of this paragraph we're looking at? Sure, she's a Spanish major, and she goes through it, and she works it through and describes what she's doing. So, well, how do I do it? I'm like, well, I kind of have no idea, but I've got Latin and French. I can kind of push it around so you're doing okay. And then learning a little bit of Spanish myself. But that student was not a great literature student. But you could see her sitting up in the class, you know, getting a little oomph because she was owning this, and she felt good about that. I love that, because that's what you're there for. It's for the learning, not for the teaching. Right? You're there for them to learn. And I think with the technology, it's the same way. We have all these stories. Constance Steinkuhler is this great scholar. She was studying...
I got to cut you off, Bryan. We're right at the end of the... We're at time.
I was going to talk about a massively multiplayer online game that could change lives. Next time. We're out of time.
It's been been fascinating. It's been inspiring.
Oh, it's fun.
Thank you so much for coming on
My
the show,
pleasure.
Bryan.
My
Such a
pleasure.
delight.
We should talk about. We should do a whole show just on the French Revolution.
Absolutely.
Vive la Révolution.
So until next time, drive safe, and may all your mischief be of the lawful persuasion.